Welcome back to Conversations from the Hearth, everyone. Today we are joined by a very special guest. We have Master Lockett from United States Taekwondo, just up the street from us. Great program up there. Master Lockett, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing very well. It's a pleasure to join you this morning.
So, we met, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago when I was kind of getting a little bit started with my program, and you were coming into the area and you're going to start your program. And we've had so we've kind of met different times, seen you at some festivals and things like that. And we have, do you know Gubon Hyun?
I
He used to, he has a
think so.
Korean restaurant down in,
Oh, yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Yes.
So we have a couple of shared.
Right. Yeah.
Friends. But anyway, I don't know you that well, and I'd like to get to know you better, and I would like my students to get to know you. One of the reasons why we do this podcast is we try to bring on other, martial artists, people who have a lot of experience like yourself to talk about different topics. And, I also want to get them to get a sense of who you are as a martial artist. So can you start us off by telling us how you got into the martial arts, and where it's brought you to today?
Sure. So, I've been training in Taekwondo for a little over 30 years now. And I'm old. So I didn't start until I was 18. I tell my students I'm 25 still every time they ask me. And they always ask me, how do you have 30 years experience if you're only 25 years old? And I say, black belt attitude.
Yes, sir.
But when I was a kid, I can remember on I don't know, watching on network TV back in the day, like TBS or something. They would show Bruce Lee movies or different kung fu movies, and that was always kind of fascinating to me. The Karate Kid came out when I was 10, and so I know a lot of people got into the martial arts at that time, but I was unable to do so because my parents were scared that I was going to inadvertently join a cult. So they saw a lot of I think a lot of in the pop culture, maybe there's a lot of kind of some of these Eastern practice like meditation and stuff like that, and all the kneeling and stuff, and they thought it might be semi-religious or something like that, and so it wasn't something that they wanted me to get into. And then when I was in high school, maybe a senior in high school, I started dating a girl who was a Taekwondo instructor at a school. And so I talked to her probably too much. She probably got annoyed at how much I, asked her about that kind of stuff. And then when I graduated from high school and went to a local community college, they had a martial arts class as a PE credit. And so I thought, oh, cool, I'll go try that out. And then I went to do that. And then, like I said, my girlfriend at the time was like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that there? Like, you could just come here, like where I teach. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I scheduled myself to go over there. And I often, whenever I get a shy student that comes in and is, sometimes scared to get on the mat for the first time, I often tell the story. The first time I pulled up to the dojang where I started training, I was scared to get out of the car and go. It's intimidating to go in when you don't know anything really. And so I think I sat in my car for like 30 minutes.
Yes, sir.
And I tell people it's a miracle that I'm here today because one of the instructors, I guess, saw me out the window, walked outside and knocked on my window and said, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'd make up some excuse. And then I went in and, it was, you hear people talk about like love at first sight, but Taekwondo was like that for me. Like I knew in my first week that 30 years later, I was still gonna be doing this. So it was really quick. And so that went from there. I trained for a few months, and then I probably, I like to think I was just a dedicated student. I was probably like scared my instructor a little bit because I was around so often and just hanging out. And then he asked me if I wanted to help with some classes. And so when I was like a green belt, which was probably about 6 months in, I started coming in, and I think he thought I was going to come and like help out with a class once a week or something. And I was pretty much there all the time.
Yes, sir.
Just assisting with classes. Really got into the teaching and mentoring. I think that's always something I've been interested in as well. And then I got into competition real big. And I think those are the two things that really have made me. I hate talking nice about myself, but like what made me good was competing, getting out of my little fishbowl, and I think I had a good attitude about if I went and got my butt kicked, instead of getting down, I would analyze it and go, all right, why did I get my butt kicked? And then I would take that back to the school and I would train. And then teaching. So when you teach other people, I'm sure you found as well, you notice things about your own practice, because you have to, when you watch them, it's easy to look at somebody and go, okay, they're making such and such mistake. But as a teacher, you have to figure out the whys. Okay, why is he having trouble with this? Why is this kid doing something? And then it really forces you to kind of analyze technique, and it's a lot easier to see other people's flaws than your own. But when you do that, then I would find myself practicing on my own and go, oh my God, I'm doing exactly what I was just telling that kid. And then I would fix it, and it really, really, it wasn't my intent to selfishly serve myself, but that's I think a lot of times how it works. Being a teacher is so rewarding, just to giving back to other people and helping other people, but it also teaches you a lot about yourself, and so I think teaching is obviously the biggest thing now. When I got to be about 26, I retired from competition, but fortunately, the teaching motivated me to continue to practice and continue to work, and 30 years later, still at it.
That's awesome.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
More power to you, sir. A lot of people, they get started in the martial arts, they get their yellow belt maybe, and that's where it ends. But for a few of us, we stick with it year after year, 30 years. It's a long time. So it's very impressive.
Yes, sir.
Now, what I know at some point you went over to Korea. What took you over there, and when in your training did that occur?
Gosh, I was, how old was I think I was 30 when I went there. I don't know if I should say that out loud.
You're only 25, so that doesn't make it.
I was 25 still. I was 25, I think, for the 5th time when I went to Korea. It was kind of it's funny, how little things in your life that seem really insignificant at the time cause decisions and things that really affect everything else that you do. It's really, really kind of cool. So I was running a school for my master. I was poor, but financially poor, but happy because I was doing what I love to do.
That's kind of the lifestyle of the martial arts instructor, isn't it?
And then what happened? We had a tournament, and I had met. It was 2 different tournaments. I went to a tournament, and they had this guy that came in from Yongin University. He was teaching at another school in the next city over. And so at this tournament, they come up and ask me, hey, do you want to go do a demonstration round of sparring with this guy? And he didn't speak any English. And I wasn't sure. On the one hand, I was like, sure, I'll do it. And then I was like, wait a minute, who's the guy?
Yes,
like, does he know that this is a demonstration? Because I got there and play with the guy, but I mean, I just want to know ahead of time, if he's going to try to take my head off,
you don't want to be a cripple
in advance, so I bring my correct game. But he was a cool guy, and so we went out there and sparred around, and that was my first taste of kind of the I don't know, quote unquote professional like Taekwondo player from Korea.
Mm.
So I got to know him a little bit, and then trying to communicate with him. That's when I started studying Korean. And so one thing that helped me when I was studying language was to listen to music a lot. And so I would listen to Korean music. And then I ended up learning the Korean national anthem. And so we hosted a tournament. And at the tournament, you know, we'd have somebody come up and sing the US national anthem, when they always did the Korean national anthem too, since we're Taekwondo. So I decided to put myself out there and I sang the Korean national anthem. And then a couple days later, this dude calls me up and says, "Hey, I saw you at the tournament the other day and I was really impressed." I didn't know what he was talking about at first, right? I was like, "What were you impressed with? Like, did I do some Taekwondo that was impressive or what?" And he was like, "Oh, he's a Korean guy." So, at that time it was really broken English, but he, talked to me and was like, "That's really cool that how did you learn that?" So we had kind of got off to a little conversation there. And so I just established this friendship with this guy, and he was studying English and I was studying Korean. He got better at English really fast.
Yeah.
He was just dedicated. It was like crazy. Like he was in his mid-20s, and like over the next year, I didn't need any Korean anymore to speak to this guy. He could just go. It was really cool. But through him, I met another guy who was a professor, a Korean professor that was over here at the U.S. Sports Academy over there in Alabama.
Mm.
And I think we were eating chicken wings or something one night, and he said, "Hey, James, clearly you're interested in Korean culture and stuff. Have you ever thought about going to Korea?" And I said, "That'd be really cool, but I don't think, Korea is short of Taekwondo instructors. Pretty sure they got that handled." And then they said, "Well, that may be true, but, there's a high demand for English. You could teach English." And that kind of sparked my interest because I liked teaching. And so one thing led to another. I ended up going back to school to get my bachelor's degree in education, lined up a job, went to Korea, thought I was going to be there for a year. And then a year turned into a decade. Ended up hooking up with a Taekwondo school over in Seoul, with a really unusual situation, especially at the time, that didn't have any kids in the program. It was an adult-only program. And so I went there just to train, and then talking to the master there, he found out about my background and then offered me a job teaching there. And so that was super cool. I got to, I was on a teaching staff with 3 or 4 former Kukyuan demonstration team members. And so it was kind of you're traveled as well. So, in anything, there's levels.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I can still, remember watching this one guy that was one of the instructors there, and he did I think he was teaching Taekwondo Iljang. So he did like a walking stance low block.
Mm-hmm.
It's bizarre to watch somebody do something that simple and go, "Wow, I will never do a low block that good." Physically incapable of doing a low block that good, because the guy was, people throw around words like world class, but like those guys are, top of the food chain.
Yeah.
And so it was like I say, it was just I've been really blessed to have some amazing experiences and work with some really high level people. Learned a lot about, Taekwondo, learned a lot about myself. And yeah, that's how that happened.
That's awesome. This might be a good launching off point into, when you went to Korea, what were some of the things that you found that were very surprising that you hadn't expected? I know you've been kind of following Korean culture your whole life. Sounds a lot like myself. I used to go to the Korean market before it was like a thing. No one knew what kimchi was, and and I remember I used to go there and get like sacks and sort of stuff. And I always wanted to be Korean, but then I went to Korea and I really got to see what Korea was all about. And there were some really wonderful things. I kind of felt like I had landed in the promised land, a land with a lot of honor and integrity. And then in other ways, there were some more challenging things. So what were some of the things that you didn't expect that, you think people would be, might be important for people to understand if they go to Korea about Korean culture?
Gosh, that's a big.
No, that's a pretty broad question.
I think compared to most of the foreigners or Americans and Canadians specifically that I met in Korea, I think I was a lot more prepared because of my Taekwondo background and because I just knew a lot of Korean people, and so I kind of knew, like, socially what to expect. And then, especially when you first get there, like, Korean people are super, super nice, especially when they don't know you yet. Like, if you're I don't know about everybody, but if you're a white American guy, every white American guy looks like Brad Pitt, and everybody wants to be your friend.
Well,
And
you look like Brad Pitt, though.
yeah,
So,
right. For the first couple of weeks, you think like, oh, this is pretty cool. And, like, nobody talks to me like this back in America, and then you gradually end up around somebody else. There'll be some guy that shows up, that's 200 pounds overweight, and they go, wow, you look like Robert Downey Jr. or something like this, and then you go, oh man, they've been blowing smoke for me the whole time. Oh my gosh, your ego at check. But like I said, they're very, Korean people are very inviting and welcoming. In my experience, that can kind of wear out if you don't know how to acclimate yourself to the culture. If you've been there for 2 years and you can't speak any Korean at all, and still don't understand, like, how the culture works, then I think, understandably, the shine wears off of you a little bit, and people are going to be a little bit less patient. But I didn't really go through any of that. I think a lot of that has to do with just my mindset. So I don't really look for differences. Like, if you go looking for differences, you're going to find differences. If you go looking for slights, you're going to find slights. You're going to find reasons. Oh, they did this because I'm a foreigner or whatever. And I never really think like that. I always look for, oh, this is, similar. This is similar. This is like Taekwondo. And what you realize pretty quick is that Taekwondo culture is not Taekwondo culture. Right? Taekwondo culture is Korean culture. Like, the reason we do all this stuff, the bowing and all that kind of stuff is just Korean culture. So you bow to your, master. You also bow to the guy at the bank, or anybody who's older than you. It's all that kind of, Confucian hierarchical kind of stuff. And so
that's why it was like the promised land, when
Taekwondo made it really easy. Like, oh, I do this stuff anyway. This is cool. I'm not a nerd here for doing this.
Yeah, I can go outside the dojo. I'm gonna be myself. In America, like, a lot of times, I bow to people, just out of habit, and they look at me like I'm crazy, But like in Korea, they would embrace it, and they'd be like, "Oh, what a respectable young man," And I think there's actually a lot more of an appreciation for trying to be honorable in Korea. I'm not saying that all Koreans are honorable, but
on the surface, at least, yeah.
There's more of appreciation of that attempt than probably in the States, which I really appreciated. So
I like, everybody's very. It's interesting when you meet somebody new, because of the cultural rules. You have to start at a certain level. You can't get too comfortable with people at first, because you got to figure out where you are. Like, how old is this guy? What position is he in? Is he, above me or below me? And then you can kind of figure out how you're going to talk to that person. And we do it in America to a point, but the Korean language has all that kind of stuff kind of set in stone, and, like, these are the words you use. Like, if I talk to my mother, who's 29, so she's 4 years older than me.
Uh,
I typically am not gonna say, yeah, and stuff like this. Even now, like, even as a grown man, I tend to speak a little more English formal to her, especially if there's other people around.
Yeah.
But in Korea, it's so ingrained, and if you don't do that, yeah, people don't know how to take you. I think exactly, because and if you know how to do it, then everybody's really cool with you because it's clear that you've made an effort to understand what's going on and you're playing by the right rules. It'd be like going and playing soccer or something, and then the ball comes to you and you pick it up and throw it.
Yes, sir. Yes,
People
sir.
are like, "What are you doing?" And if you continue to do it, then people, of course, are going to not want to play with you anymore. And so, yeah.
It's interesting though, didn't you also find that Koreans were so obsessed with your culture and in English that they
Yes.
didn't really want to speak Korean? Because like once I learned how to speak Korean, I always try to speak Korean, and a lot of people that just give me English, except for my close friends who basically did me a service by talking to me in Korean, but I mean they all wanted to learn English and learn about American culture, and I was no, I want to learn about your culture. That's what's so important to me.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you go somewhere in public, and then I can remember, when I first got there, I'd be all excited. I'd be like riding in the taxi cab or walking up to a restaurant or something and rehearsing in my head, I'm going to order my food. And so then I go in there and order, and then they answer in English. And I'd be like, oh, you can't say anything to them. I can't talk to this older lady and go, hey, don't speak English to me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm sure they're like super excited also
You
to
know,
speak English to you, and if you can understand them, they get really happy. It's funny.
on that note, man, they're so used to you speaking English to them that if you speak Korean at them, they like have to do a double take and they don't even
Sometimes they don't
understand,
know.
right? Even when you speak perfect Korean, okay? I had this, it was almost comical. I was studying at Sejongdae, and English, Korean, and I was actually pretty fluent at this point. And I would go downstairs and I would go to the coffee shop and I would, order a cup of coffee in I thought like perfect pronunciation Korean. And the lady would just be like, she would not understand me, until like 6 months in, like I had been studying there. And like I was like, because she had to like first figure out like, oh, this guy's talking to me in Korean, like
You're not expecting that voice to come out of that face.
yeah. So that was always kind of frustrating. You would try to look smart, and then you just look like an idiot.
Yeah, my favorite experience. It's fun. It shows you like different people's perspectives. The context is everything. So the school I worked at, I taught at a foreign language high school. For people who don't like, a foreign language high school is like a really top level, top 5% of the middle school students get into some of these specialty schools. And one of the other instructors who kind of ended up becoming like my best friend was a Korean American. And his Korean at the time was probably a little bit better than me, but he wasn't fluent. And I remember we went to this restaurant and we're ordering, and I order, and they're like gushing over me because I ordered in Korean. They're like, "Oh my gosh, 한국말 잘하시네요. Your Korean's so great," and I'm feeling really happy about myself. Like, yeah, I'm studying's paying off. And then he ordered, and it was, like I said, at least as good as mine, probably a little bit better. And they looked at him like he was an idiot.
I know.
Because he was a Korean face, they didn't know he spoke English. They're looking at him like, "What's wrong? Why you talk like that?"
What's
Like,
wrong with this person?
like he talks like people. You're talking like a you're a grown man, but you're speaking like a kid would talk. Because the I don't know, the vocabulary or grammar structures or something or
Yeah.
people, and if the pronunciation's even a little off, yeah, then they just look at you like. And I remember they looked at him, they looked at me like they wanted my help, and I was like, I don't know what you're looking at me for. And I immediately, felt horrible for for him realizing he has to go through this.
Yeah.
And my master has told me, you know, we've talked a lot about it. He was born here. He's Korean, but he's born here. And when he was a kid, his parents kind of took a different tack than some, you know, I think that depends on the generation. There was a generation that they wanted their kids to really assimilate into American culture as quickly as possible. And so like he was not allowed to speak Korean at home.
Mm.
His parents would speak Korean to him, but they were like, no, you're living in America, you're going to speak English. And so he can understand, you know, most of what's being said to him, but he doesn't speak Korean really well. And so when he goes around now, you know, as a, you know, adult, he's a little older than me, you know, and he'll tell me like sometimes people like talk about him in front of him. And he's like, dude, I can understand you. Why are you talking about me? You know? And so I guess that's my like white privilege. I can say something that's really simple and you know.
Yeah, there's a lot of that over
Really
there.
impressed.
Because you know, if you teach English and you're Korean, you're seen as kind of lesser than an American teaching English, you know? And but then conversely, like I went over there not to teach English, I went over there to teach Taekwondo. And if you're an American teaching Taekwondo, you're seen as lesser than a Korean. So it goes both ways. And there may be some small truth to that. I mean, you're a native speaker of English, so you're going to have some command of some things. And, you know, Koreans do generally train at a much higher level than Westerners in the martial arts. So I think it's just, you know, not completely unfounded, but it is a little unfair sometimes. Anyway, on the same topic, so we talked a little bit about the cultural differences. Did you want to jump in here, Mr.
Well, I was going to ask, this might be a major diversion, but part of your story you were telling at the beginning, just kind of about your background and going to Korea, you had mentioned the school that you were training at was an adult-only program. And this was kind of a small detail, but I caught on to it. And I'm just curious, what was it about that time period or where you were that made that adult-only program so unique or maybe special?
It basically didn't exist.
Okay.
There's a couple of them now, but you know, even in America, I would say Taekwondo schools are probably at least. I would say every school. I don't know about your school. My school, you know, fits this description. We're probably at least 80% kids, and then a lot of the adults end up in the program because their kids are in the program. It's not that it doesn't happen, but it's not as common for adults to come in. And
I think it's on steroids in Korea as more than America, because you do see some. Our school has 30 or 40% adults. It's not everyone, but we're definitely trying.
I would say that's an abnormally high number, though. And
that's partly because we, you know, really focus on self-defense, and we're trying to be a more serious martial arts program. Not say that Taekwondo is not serious and Taekwondo programs aren't serious. But yeah, we are very good with children, so we do attract you know, that clientele, you know, for those leadership life skills, which I think we're kind of the best in the business at, to be totally honest. But what's interesting is that in Korea, but like in America, there are generally some adults training at schools. It's not like only kids, but in Korea, one of the things that I found very surprising when I went over there was, wow, at the academy level, it's like all kids, and it's actually a lot less serious than I was expecting. And I think the reason why that has occurred is that anyone who's worth their salt goes into the teams right away. Like my wife, you know, she went to a physical education boarding school very early on in her training, and she lived there with her coach like a sumo wrestler in a stable, and was told when to eat and when to train and when to sleep, and she had to cut off all her hair, and she could never wear makeup until she was in her mid-20s, you know. And so it was hardcore. It's really hardcore, and that's where all the hardcore people go. And so you're kind of left at the academy level with the people who are just they're just looking for a place for their kids to blow off some steam, you know, and maybe get some you know, some fitness, keep up their fitness, but it's not. I was like a deer in the headlights when I started working at an academy and working with the kids and thinking, man, in America, like people are like really respecting me and all this kind of stuff. And I go in there and I'm
That
like,
was that was eye-opening when you get there and then you realize that Taekwondo instructor in Korea is often, I don't know, pick a stereotypically like low thought of profession. You know,
hmm,
Taekwondo instructor is about one step up from that.
Mm.
But I think even here, you know, I wish our industry as a whole was a little more professional, because we get that as well. You know, I can't tell you how many times I'll be talking to somebody and they ask me what I do, and I tell them what I do, and then they say, "Oh, that's kind of neat. What else do you like? What's
hmm,
your day job? Like, what do you do for in the day? What do you how do you eat?" Uh, and then have to explain to people that no, if you kind of know what you're doing and
these
you
people,
do things as a professional, like you attract
they're just jealous.
like-minded people, and you can you can actually like feed your kids and live a decent life. You don't have to
Yeah, absolutely. These people
live
are just
in the
jealous.
basement.
You have fun every day you go to work, every day to go
I
do
get to
unfun
work in my
stuff. What they
pajamas.
don't realize is it's a ton of work. You know, I,
That's true.
I got arthritis in all my joints now, and when I go out there to teach, it hurts every time I kick and punch, and I got to still do it, and I got to teach a lot of classes. And I'll tell you, the emotional energy of
Mhm.
teaching just a couple of kids classes, it takes a lot out of you. I don't think the parents realize that. So um, it's at the end of the day work like anything else is work, and it's one of the most rewarding jobs you can do. But you know,
Mm.
it's not as easy as I think people realize. I think.
That's for sure.
Yeah. So okay, so you know, what were some of these differences that you found when you went to Korea about the Taekwondo? Like, you know, you said you went to an adult only academy, and that is really unique. I actually did not know those existed. Where I trained was with university teams, pretty much exclusively. I did train with some high school teams as well. But that's where you would get that high level training. But that's really cool. And I know there has been somewhat of a push um, to tap into that adult market. You know, my master, one of my many masters that I've trained on over the year, Kobong Su, who's now the president of the Jelabukta Taekwondo Association. He was the secretary general when I first went over there, and I was living with him. He actually did a tour with the Kukiwan all over America about 3 or 4 years ago now. And their principal reason for coming was because they wanted to learn from Americans how to tap into that adult market because they were very interested in it. And I don't know why I'm going off in this direction because I want to hear more from you on, you know, what were some of the differences in Taekwondo and Korea you thought?
Yeah. So that was like the first thing was I didn't even find it. My wife found it. I
Oh,
was I found a little gojang around the corner from my apartment, uh, and I was like
mm,
the only adult
yeah.
other than the master. Uh, and then she found somehow, I asked her, "Can you find me a good place?" Because I was moving to a different neighborhood, and then she told me, "Yeah, I found this place. It's only adults," and it was like honestly, it was like somebody telling me, they found a unicorn. I
Hmm.
was like, yeah, right. Somebody's like, this is like some kind of trolls blog or something that they're putting this up. That's not a real thing. Like, I'd never seen an adult only taekwondo school in America, and it's certainly, you know, in Korea, you
Sure.
throw a rock and you're going to hit a English academy or a math academy or a taekwondo jang uh, on every street. And it's all kids, uh, and so I was like, okay, this sounds cool. And then I went, and it was awesome. I mean, it was like 30 or 40 people.
Mm-hmm.
all adults. At the time, it was probably, I don't know, 60-40 Korean to foreigners there.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it was great. Like we could train, and there was people at all levels, like I said, from very beginner people, who were just looking to learn about Korean culture and stuff, all the way up to these, super like world-class guys that, you know, they were on the Kukiwon national demonstration team. And then, they have like Korea is such a small country, so everybody knows everybody. And, they have like a network. And so they'd be, they're going to bring my friend over. And then this other guy comes in and you're like, oh my God, there's another guy that's amazing.
Yeah.
So, all of that there, that was really cool. And that was different. But I think the first thing that struck me was when I'd look around and, people talk about, in America, you got, the concept of black belt means something different everywhere, but a lot of people have this like crazy high expectation of, they think some people think like black belt means everything, like you're a master and an expert. And in Korea, black belt is, I don't want to say meaningless, but fairly meaningless. Like first degree black belt, part of that's just because everybody has a black belt. Like it would be crazy to talk to somebody that's not a black belt, didn't get a black belt when they were a kid in Korea. Everybody's got one. And I think part of that is just because it's what Korean people do. It's a big part of Korean culture. It'd be like here in America, like everybody's probably played Little League baseball.
Well, what I tell my students, there's a big misconception, I think, in the Western world that a black belt means you're an expert. And I think how this all got started was that the first, like Americans to go over to Japan and Korea with the military were only able to stay over there for a couple of years. And then they come back with like a first or second degree black belt and they would start teaching. They didn't really have any right to be teaching because in Taekwondo, fourth degree black belt's where it starts really in Korea. But they would do it because no one knew any better. And they would say, well, I'm an expert because I'm a black belt. And then people being Americans, like anyone, Koreans too, think if you want to be an expert, it's going to take more than a couple of years. And so they would say, yeah, it's going to take you 10 years to get your black belt. And that's where this whole idea of like a 10-year black belt. And you look at westernized martial arts like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and they do like 10 years for a black belt very commonly. And you can compare that time and rank to a time and rank for a fourth degree black belt, which is very equivalent. So in my mind, actually, a fourth degree black belt in traditional Asian martial art like Taekwondo, karate, or judo is similar to a black belt in westernized martial arts like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Because both sides of the equation, they mean the same thing, but we just have radically misunderstood what a black belt means. In my academy that I was teaching at, and I taught it at much different places. I worked with the Jelly Boots Taekwondo Association, but one of my principal places of teaching was at Singo Jaekwon. And there, I remember to my horror, it took me 7 years to get my black belt, and I worked blood, sweat, and tears, to get it. And the instructor who I was teaching with, she would be promoting the kids every month to their next belt. And I was just horrified. And then it would be a really simple exam. And she would go reach into a closet and she'd pull out a belt. And if she didn't have the right color belt, she'd just throw some random color on there. I mean, on like a pink belt, it didn't even matter. It didn't matter until you got your black belt, because that's when it first started. Now, I do think, when I say this, people are like, well, then ranks in Asia don't mean anything. It does start to mean something, like fourth, fifth, sixth. Like as you start getting up in that area, it does mean something. But that's actually what the symbolism is supposed to be. Fourth to sixth, these are your master instructors. Seventh to ninth, these are your grandmaster officials. And first to third, these are just your student black belts. These are people who, in our mind, would be like Keller belts, probably. But what we're trying to do at my school, because we have Western perception to deal with, and then we have Eastern perception, is try to kind of skate the middle there, where we have a good standard for our black belt. It takes me 5-6 years to get a black belt. Sometimes, like some people like Mr. Trader can do it in 4, but that's because he trains every single day and he's working at the academy 6 days a week, but we have pretty high standards. But still, I tell them, I say, look, you're not an expert. You're still, you have a command of the fundamentals. And what black belt in Korea means is that you know enough fundamentals to go into a competition, an open competition without any divisions, and compete against you and I. And you wouldn't put somebody who just starting out in that kind of competition, because they would get just their neck broken with a spinning hook kick or something on like the first time they went out there, you know? So that's what it means. That's really what it means. And, you know, one of the things that I found so interesting in Korea is that they don't have any color belt tournaments. They're all black belt tournaments. And I thought that was so refreshing and cool. But
no time for a color belt tournament because they're black belt in a year. So
that's true too. But I think that's really what a black belt, you know, symbolizes basically in Asia. And
well, you mentioned earlier, you know, about they have the teams and they have high school programs and college programs. So I think that's one thing, you know, if somebody like a first degree black belt in America went over and they watched like a black belt kids test at Kukiwan and they didn't have any background information, they'd probably come out of that going, man, these black belts are terrible.
Yep. Yeah.
Because they look like, but they're not terrible. They look like they've trained for a year. Like, so they look like a, you know, a green belt or a blue belt
Yes, sir.
at a school here that's been training for a year. But because everybody in Korea does it, you know, like you were talking about, it can be a little bit less serious at that academy level with those the kids, but a lot of it is kind of like a talent evaluation. Like they're looking to see who's really got an aptitude for it. Because Koreans are really about like big about specializing and stuff. If they find they're good at it, then they're gonna like take it as far as they can take it. And so when they identify some of these kids, then they're pulling those guys and they're gonna go train at a you know, a higher level with a team or whatever. And so that was also
that's
a really big difference.
That's something that was very surprising to me is Don didn't mean nearly as much to Koreans as it means to Americans, because for us, that's all we have. That's all we have. And so it's almost like metachlorians, you know, like if you're like you have these powers, if you get to 6th level, you can start to fly, and like 7th degree, you have like laser beams shooting out of your eyes. I mean, it becomes this like power level. It's like ridiculous, but that's how sort of Westerners think about it. Whereas Asians are like, there's more important certification and qualifications to be had than Dan. Dan is like the if you were learning traditional dance, Korean dance, there would be some steps that you would take that were like, you know, in your little traditional dance pathway. But if you were going to go and be a competitor and be teaching traditional dance, like there's things that are more important than that. And so like one of these things is like being on a team, especially a good team, is way more impressive than having high dan. You know, I would be training with some of the best in the world. I trained with the Korean national team. I trained at Hanguk Chede, and there were people who were like first degree black belts. Okay, they've been training for like 15 years. They were like world champions, and they're like a first degree black belt. They're like, yeah, I don't have time. I don't have time to like worry about learning form. You know, I just focused on my sparring. And so they're like a first degree black belt, but like everyone's like worshiping the ground they walk on because they're amazing, you know. And that concept is very foreign for like Westerners. And then you'd have some guy, you know, Ko Bong-soo, like this guy is the president of the Olympic Association. He's amazing. He was a world champion. He's a professor at one of the universities in Jeonju, Vision Day, and he is a 6th degree black belt, and he got that 6th dan probably 30 years ago, and he just stopped. And he's not concerned about it because that's not really that important to what people view him. Like there's more important certification to be had. There's more important accolades to be had. Being a professor is more important. Being like a coach of a team, being the president of like a regional organization, that's way more important. That's hard for us to wrap our mind around. But it would be like if you were a doctor and you didn't get your doctorate, but someone else got your doctorate, but you're running like the entire hospital. You know, yeah, you know, you're like a president of a university, but you don't have your doctorate. Then there's some guy who just graduated college and he has his doctorate. It's like, yeah, but you're not a president of a university. That's like a big those are really big differences.
Yeah, well, I think real martial arts people are more concerned to a point. Like if you're 90 years old, I'm not looking at you and going, oh, your sidekicks not high enough.
Yeah.
I'm much more impressed with what somebody can do on the mat, than how many bars they
Yeah.
have on their belt. That was another thing that was a lot different in my experience in Korea. Nobody's got all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's uniform for the most part is plain.
Mm-hmm.
Their belt is plain. Maybe they have their name on their belt. There's
Mm-hmm.
almost never a bar or anything like that on their belt. I wore a plain black, I didn't have my name on it. It's a plain black belt. I can count, I was in Korea for 10 years. I can count on one hand how many times somebody asked me what dan I was.
Yeah.
And it was all Americans or Canadians who were
Yeah.
visiting who asked me that question. Nobody else ever questioned my rank. And the school I taught at, like I had a second degree Kukyuan certification when I got there. I was a third degree under my master, but we didn't. When I tested for my third degree, I didn't have the money to pay for the Kukyuan certification, so I didn't get it. So I stayed third degree for like 11 or 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't worried about it.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I don't want to. I ran into too many people coming up who were like counting the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm a second degree. I got to be second degree for 2 years. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I haven't trained, but it's my time. I'm going to go test, and then they, stumble through their form and break their boards, and then there's your new certificate, whatever. And so I tested for my third degree at Kukyuan at some point. I don't remember what year it was, and then the master I was working for, the guy that hired me, he like fudged it. I saw his blog on the web, and it had my name, and it said 5th degree black belt. As I guess he wanted to have appearances and stuff. But I mean, we walked out on the floor, and he introduced me to the class, and he said, this is James Sabomnim, and everybody called me Sabomnim from that point on. And I didn't have an issue with it because I'd been teaching for 10 years already back in America. I knew what I was doing, and I think it was pretty clear. He watched me, and he knew what my physical skill was up to par, and I could teach. And so, he thought I brought value to the program, and so he brought me in. And I can remember there's this one girl, a woman, and she was wondering, she was trying to find out how come people are not calling her Sabomnim, because she got her 4th degree. And so she was like asking me, hey, how come they call you Sabomnim and they don't call me Sabomnim? Because I'm a 4th degree and you're a 3rd degree. And she had been training for 7 years. I think I'd been training for, I don't know, 15, 16 years at that time. And I was like, well, I mean, Sabomnim is a teacher. Do you teach classes? Well, no. Okay. So do you have a rank mark on your belt? No. Okay. So maybe they don't know you're a 4th degree and you're not teaching, so they're not calling you teacher. Maybe we're a little too preoccupied with titles or whatever. And so, like I said, I never have to wear any rank. Nobody ever asked me my rank. It always seemed like a much bigger deal in the States.
Yeah.
I can remember dreading going to a tournament when I would find out like certain people like out here, oh, he just got his 4th degree. And I would be like, oh my gosh, this is going to be awful. This guy's going to go around and tell everybody, force everybody to call him master all day. I don't mind calling somebody master, but I always feel awkward if I meet even another Taekwondo guy, not at an official Taekwondo thing. And you go to introduce yourself, and I'm like, hey, I'm James. And they go, I'm master so-and-so. I'm like, all right, I don't know where to go from here. Like, I'm not, if we're all in uniform, then of course we're going to, master this and master that. And, I call 5-year-old kids, sir. So that's not a big deal. But it's always been amazing. And of course, this is a generalization. It's not everybody, like I met you and you were cool. and I like ambushed you. I remember I was, I have a habit of, if I see a school when I'm driving around somewhere, I gotta like pull into the parking lot and look in the window and stuff. And then sometimes I just go in. And I can remember my wife was in the car with me. I was like, oh, look, it's a technical school. We gotta stop. The lights are on. We gotta stop. And so I just walked in the door and was like, hey,
Mm.
how's it going? And a lot of people, might be like, who's this guy? Is this somebody that's gonna open up a school next door to me or something like this? And I don't know what you were thinking, but you were
No, no, it's-
outwardly like you were just cool. It was no big deal. And then that's like that was the first time I met you, and I think I don't know if I saw it on your website or something that you had lived in Korea, and I was like, oh, this guy like he lived in Korea like me, and he met his wife over there like me. So it was, I was like, I got to go in and at least chat this guy up.
Mm.
And then, fortunately, you know, you were a cool guy. You were not a jerk. And hopefully I didn't come across as a jerk. And so now we can, have this conversation several years later. Um,
Well,
and so
I'm sorry, not to,
that was enlightening to me. And I think part of it is just because, like I said, Taekwondo culture and Korea culture is the same. And
Yeah.
so there's no, generally speaking, not so much pretentiousness with it, because it's doesn't matter if we're in the dojang or outside the dojang or in uniform, out of uniform, you're going to talk to these people the same way all the time. And it's not like people are forcing you to do, to act out of character, out of the norm.
yeah. I mean that, you know, you can call me John, I don't really care either way, Master Rolls John. I'm very laid back. When I meet people from other styles that have a totally different organization than me, I'm just, we're just colleagues, I'm John, whatever your name is your name. But one of the things I love about Korean culture is these long term relationships, this deeply seated culture. I would never call my master by his first name, like ever. It doesn't matter if we're in the school or out of the school or whatever. I'm going to show him that respect till the day I die. And I think that's something very special. I meet a lot of, it's kind of dying out too. I meet a lot of modern martial artists that don't understand that kind of Korean culture and that respect. And so it makes me want to hold on to it even more and not be too flippant with it. In our school, we're pretty formal, and we you maintain that, and it's not, I think it can be an ego thing. I think some school owners are like, I want to be the top of the pile because I want to be on top. I want to teach martial arts because I want to help people get to a high level of proficiency, and I really like making these connections, these relationships, and getting to know people deeply. And so it's not about, I mean, maybe it is. I try not to be about ego. It's not about ego, but I love my master, and I will always call him Grandmaster Kwan, and I'll make myself small when I'm near him, and I want to pass that on to my students because I think it's a really special thing. Koreans are some of the most humble people I've ever met because they're always the boss of somebody, and they're being bossed around by somebody else. And that's a really good position to be in. In the West, we can see like the kind of the kings of our own little kingdom sometimes, and we can structure our lives so that we never have to like listen to anyone else. And, and that can like be really psychologically damaging. And we get these weird people that have these very strange takes on reality because they've been allowed to be so private in the way they conduct themselves. And Koreans are just like, from Westerners' perspective, it can be a little abrasive, but they just get in there and they treat you how you're supposed to be treated, and you can't escape it. But that's why Koreans are so down to earth, in general. And so
We're the same way here.
yeah.
Like I'm fairly laid back, but my students call me Master Lockett.
Mhm.
Parents call me Master Lockett. I don't ask them to call me that.
Mhm.
Honestly, selfishly, it's kind of a little test that I run with when I'm talking to parents.
Mhm.
It lets me know who's buying into the culture of the
Yes,
school,
sir. Yes, sir.
which I think is more important than curriculum or anything else. Like if you have a good culture in your school, things are going to go well. And so the parents typically, without being asked, they do it, and that sets the example for their kids to do it. All the instructors, black belts, we call them by their last name.
Yeah.
They're under 4th degree, then they're Mr. or Miss whatever. And I feel it's kind of the same way. It's not a brand new black belt. There might be a little ego trip there because they get to get a new thing. I'm the same way. I've been out of my original instructor school since 2007, but he's still, obviously we have an instructor and student relationship, but he's, one of my best friends, and I could call him, his first name is John, and I could probably, if I said, "What's up, John?" I don't think he'd be like, "What you talking about? You better call me by my." But like you, it's not an ego thing, it's a respect thing. When I met him, he was just, I called him Mr. Kim, and then now he's like an 8th or 9th degree. I call him Master Kim. Some people will call him Grandmaster Kim, but he never, I think he feels a little uncomfortable with it. He never says Grandmaster about himself. And I'm kind of the same. Like I don't ever introduce myself as Master anything. I'll just say like my first and last name. And then most people, who know what's going on are gonna, follow the culture that's at play at the time. And I think it makes things really comfortable. But yeah, you can, when there's ego involved, you can take it. I can remember we had a guy come to judge a testing years and years and years ago. And he drove over from another city. And then he sat in on the testing. It was like 4 or 5 hours. And at the end, we were going to go to dinner. And he was like, hang on a second, let me go talk to my driver. And I was like, driver? What do you mean driver? He's like, my student. I had my student, drive me here. And I was like, where's your student? He's in the car. And I was like, what? He's in the car. Like, where's he? Like, for 5 hours, he's been sitting in the car? He's like, yeah, he wasn't allowed to come in because he was way down here. I was like, oh my God, how is he still your student? How does somebody, I can't imagine somebody, allowing themselves to be treated that way. But it's a good lesson for me. Like, man, I can remember, I was a young guy at the time, and I remember thinking like, man, I am never going to do that to somebody.
I think
hot car in Alabama for 5 hours.
I think, I've noticed a lot of that since I've moved to Texas, especially, but like people just really don't want to use titles and things like that. And like I said, I don't want to overdo it, and I don't want it to come from a place of ego, and I definitely think it can, but I think it's like American culture where we just don't feel comfortable with it. It reminds me a lot of when I would say sir and ma'am up in the north, and people would just think I was like insulting them. They'd be like, "What you say to me? You said sir? Like, are you mocking me?" Whereas like in the South, they accept it a little bit more because it's more part of the culture.
Yeah, well, you get smacked if you didn't say.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And so I think that's kind of what's going on with those titles and that subordination, that subordinate role and all that kind of stuff, is that Americans just don't understand how that works, and they're not used to that. In Korean culture, now I did do stuff like that, drive my master around and do like sleep in his closet and do whatever the heck he asked me to do. I mean, I would do anything for him. Like I was and not just one master, a lot of my instructors, that's the culture. And you gotta wipe down, clean the mats and wipe down the windows and all the Karate Kid kind of stuff before you can rise. And it teaches humility. If you don't have to get egg on your face and you can suddenly get some grand title, then you don't learn to be humble. And I really think that kind of stuff is important. Now, being a senior is a great responsibility too, and you don't want to, exploit it in a mean way. But you know, I think it can be a really beautiful thing to just like, you know, my master will call me up and I have lots of different masters, but he'll call me up and he'll be like, you know, Master Olds, I saw a picture of you on Facebook. You're looking fat, sir. I don't want to see that. You know, you need to lose some weight. And I'm like, yes, sir. You know, like he can say that to me.
Very direct.
He can say that to me, but no one else in my life can say that to me, you know? And so it's good. It's good to have someone out there who can just kick me in the balls, you know? And I don't know, I've always enjoyed that part of the martial arts, you know. And when I went to Korea, man, I really got a good feeling that, see, for me, I lived with a Korean family that spoke no English, and where I trained spoke no English, and I was just completely immersed in the culture. And at times I got a little more of the fire hose than I could handle, but but it was good. It was good, and I really feel like that culture is special.
That's funny that you mentioned, you know, like your instructor kind of breaking your balls a little bit. I don't think they think of it as that way. They're just telling you, you know. That was another thing to not to go back, but to go back to what we were talking about before. Yeah, Korean people will say things to you and they'll just tell you sometimes what they're thinking.
Yeah, they're very direct. Huh?
From an American perspective, like, man, what kind of rude, you know, jerk are you? But they have like, to them, it's not rude at all. It's just they notice something and then they say it. And so, you know, my students would see me in the morning, you know, when I was teaching at that high school, and they'd be like, "Hey, teacher, you know, if you put on weight, you look fat today," or "Did you drink a lot last night? You got dark circles under your eyes." I was like, I can't imagine, you know, it's weird because in America, we're so much more laid back, but I was like, I can't imagine ever asking like a high school teacher, a personal question like that. But they would say stuff like that. And then I can remember I got, you know, being a foreigner in Korea, I had an opportunity to do some like television stuff. We did some TV show. I think it was about international relationships or something like that. And so they found out I don't remember if I was married yet or if I was just engaged. I may have just been engaged, but there's a show called Love in Asia. You've probably seen it before. But they took me to Grandmaster Kang Shin Cho's school over in the, where's that? Suwon, I think. And you know, some of the guys, if you watch Taekwondo on YouTube, you may have seen this guy. He's
Yeah, I know
really,
what you're talking about.
he's got like the long,
Yeah,
flowing white hair, and he
really high,
often does the demos in the like these traditional robes and stuff, and he's super flexible. And
that was an awesome axe kick.
some of these guys, you know, I think everybody feels that way a lot of times about like their first instructor. They just have this bigger than life presence. You can tell when they walk in the room. And this guy, like, have you ever met him?
I haven't met him, no. I mean, I know of him,
He's
but
like super intimidating.
yeah.
But afterwards, you can't figure out why he's super intimidating. Like, it feels like I remember standing there, and it felt like he was like this giant. He just had that kind of presence, like he's huge, but he's not abnormally large or anything. But he's really, really skilled. And I don't know if I was seeing his regular classes or if he just had some other people in there. There was a bunch of black belts, but they were all like super skilled at what they were doing. And we did something, and he was having me do a board break. And so he puts the boards up there, and he looks at me and he goes, "Gyokpa," you know, break it. And I was like, "What do you want? You know, how do you want me to break it? What would you like me to do?" And then he pulls this other student over there, like this, you know, 20-year-old hotshot, and he does like a 540 hook kick, pow. And then he looks at me and he goes, "Gyokpa." And I was, I don't know, 35, something like that. Don't tell anybody. But at the time, and I was like, man, I could do that kick, but I haven't done that kick in a couple of years. Like it's not what I've been doing. But he didn't ask me, "Hey, would you like to do this?" or "Can you do this?" He just said, "Do it." because of that presence, I was like, crap, I guess I have to, like, I guess they can edit this out and post, if it turns out bad. And so I was like, yeah. And then, fortunately I did it. The adrenaline was kicking pretty good. And so I put it up there and I did it. And then I don't know if he was surprised or not, but he was just like, Chadhu. And then he pulled me aside afterwards and told me, pointed at me, he said, "This is not Taekwondo body. You need to make Taekwondo body."
uh,
I was too in awe to be offended by it.
yeah.
It was like, yes, sir. I gotta go try to make a Taekwondo body. If an American guy had said that to me, I'd probably been pretty angry. But like I said, coming from him, I was like, man. And then it was weird because the producer of the show that was with us, we got outside and we started talking. And I was like, man, that guy's, not that he's mean or anything, but he has an intimidating presence. And the other guy, who's not a Taekwondo guy, he was like, oh my God, I was scared. Like, because he like, if he tells me to do something, I feel like I got to do it too. Like, whatever.
Yes, sir. That's funny.
That guy, he's we talk about like the king of the kingdom. He's the king of his kingdom, but he's got, forget any titles or anything. He's got the accolades to match it. Like you can just see that he's really, really good, even as an older guy. Like he's still very skilled. It's clear that he takes care of himself. He went to Iran and was the head coach of their, like, his specialty is Pumse, but like head coach of their Pumse team. And you see the guys, when you see somebody go to another country and create like world-class people there too, it's like, okay, yeah. So it's pretty clear he knows what he's about. So it was a really, like I said, a scary experience. It's very humbling.
Yeah.
You feel like you're somebody, and then you see how somebody else and you go, oh my gosh, all right, I guess you can take that, and go, oh, time to quit. I'm not going to get there. Or you can look at it and go, all right, yeah, this is cool. I'm 35 years old. I've been a black belt for a long time, but you can see a path, like there's more to do, and there's always more to learn, which I think is, super important to also let your kids know, whether it's in martial arts or anything else. Like, you got to keep learning. Like, you stop learning, I think you're going to die.
Yeah. I think that's one of the beautiful things about Asian culture, like in Korean culture especially, is that there's just this universal understanding that the path is much, much, much longer than it is in the West. If you look at the Dan system, is there anything in the West that's like the Dan system? No. Like,
we can't wait that long.
That you can train to you're like 60 and you're still not highest ranked. And even when you train your whole life, you can't be max Dan until you're like dead. It was like a post-mortem award. So it's like, there's nothing really like that. And in Korea, everything is like that a lot. And so you don't have this ego where people think like, okay, I'm a third degree black belt and I just won like nationals and now I've got everything figured out and I'm done. In Korea, it's like, yeah, okay, but you're still a kid and you still have to say yes, sir, to the senior person over here. And, you really will never be in a position almost at any time in your life where you can just like unequivocally say, I'm the big cheese. And I think that's so beautiful. It's one of the best things about Korean culture.
Yeah, I've got this, I don't know if you can see it, but I've got this big poster board over here with like the belt rank system. And on the far side of it, it's got like the Dan ranks. And then it says, minimum, if you're a first degree, you got to stay there at least 1 year. If you're a second degree, you got to stay there at least 2 years. I'll see my kids go over there and start doing math. And it's fun to watch them because their eyes change as they, and then they look at me and they go, how many bars are on his belt? Like, you can't look at me. That third degree over there says 3 years. Like, I was there for 11 years at least.
Um,
And then they start going, wait, how are you 25? Hey,
mhm,
black belt attitude.
Yes,
mhm,
sir.
I gotta stay young. But
mhm,
Taekwondo, it gives you that, my body's old,
mhm,
but my heart and my mind is, still like a kid,
mhm.
in the right ways.
Yeah,
Still
absolutely.
have that. I still got that childish curiosity. You know, After 30 years, I'm still trying to, how can I make this back kick bet? If I can land this back kick 80% of the time,
Yeah,
how can I land it 81%?
Yes, sir.
yes,
Yes,
sir.
Try
sir.
to incrementally,
That's what I'm talking
or at
about.
least stay the same, right?
Yeah.
When you get over 40, yeah, then you got to like work hard just so you don't lose it. Right?
It's like treading water, it's like, oh man, I
Every
got
time somebody
4
takes a
hours
video of me, I
left.
look at it and I go, and I'm like, oh man, one of these days, because I know it's coming, right? One of these days, I'm going to watch myself on video and I'm going to be like, that's an old guy. And so I'm just trying to make sure that doesn't happen yet, right? Every day, it's like, all right, let's make sure that if somebody videos me doing something today, that I don't, I look like a normal guy. Like I don't look like I'm an old guy yet.
Well,
And
you're
so far, I can still get out there and move.
well, that might be a good note to end on because
Yes,
you
sir.
definitely
Yes,
look
sir.
still like a young guy. You keep in good shape. You have that
Stop dyeing my hair white
Taekwondo
though.
body, that a good Taekwondo body for being only 25 years old.
That's
So
right. Hard to stay 25 this long.
yeah, I'm sure we could sit here and talk for another 2 or 3 hours or probably forever. So probably have to cut it at some point, but we do really appreciate you coming on the show and telling us a little bit about your history and how you get started. And from what I've heard, you're doing great things up there with United States Taekwondo. I wish you all the best of luck. If you ever want to come back on the show, we'd love to have you. Great conversationalist, and you have a lot of experience not only in Taekwondo, but in the divide between East and West and Korean culture and things like that. So you're a real resource for anyone, so your students are very lucky to have you, sir, and we really appreciate having you on.
Thank you very much. I'll be happy to come back anytime.